And welcome along to this week's RTÉ Rugby podcast, episode 6 of the new season of the BKT United Rugby Championship. We've got Bernard Jackman and Ian Keatley with us this afternoon, and we got plenty to get through because yesterday Ireland head coach Andy Farrell named his 37-man squad for the Bank of Ireland Autumn Nations games against South Africa, Fiji and Australia. We'll also talk through this weekend's URC games, the big one obviously being Leinster against Munster this Saturday evening at the Aviva Stadium. 5:15 kickoff. That's live on RT2 and RT Player, and live radio coverage as well on RT Radio 1. But also at the same time that evening, Sharks taking on Ulster. That looks like being a brilliant match, particularly with the Sharks team that they've named this morning. We'll let you know that later on. And also then Friday evening, kicking things off in the URC this weekend, it's Connacht looking for their second win of the season. They are up against the Scarlets at the Sports Ground. First, though, we'll concentrate on all things Ireland because, as I said, Andy Farrell named his 37-man squad yesterday for those games next month. I won't run through the entire squad. You can see that on rte.ie, but I suppose the big absentees, James Lowe, Ian Henderson and Andrew Conway, none of whom have played yet this season due to injury. They've all been left out of the squad, understandably. Keith Earls also not involved as well. He's been injured the last few weeks, although he did play the first couple of games of the season for Munster, but he's been out since then. And some notable inclusions: Kieran Frawley named as an out half on the squad, interestingly enough. Hugo Keenan, who's been out all season, he is involved in the 37-man squad, while Stuart McCluskey, Calvin Nash for his first Irish call-up, Jacob Stockdale back as well, and Jeremy Lockman, some of the fringe players involved in the squad. So Bernard, Ian Keatley, thanks a million for joining me. I suppose to get straight in with the Irish squad, Birch, any surprises about who was included or who wasn't included first up?
No, look, obviously, given the fact that Ireland are going to November in a really good place, it was always going to be a pretty, much a tried and tested team. I think we're seeing guys come in who've shown up well. So Calvin Nash, Jimmy O'Brien, Prendergast obviously had done well in New Zealand and did well on the Emerging Ireland Tour. David Heffernan has been good for Connacht. And with King Kelleher out, I suppose he was a natural choice to come back in. Nick Timoney's been really good. He's only got 2 caps, but he's been really good for Ulster. And I think it's nice to see that Ireland A panel. I think I'm a big believer in trying to get extra games in November because we've such depth. I think it's important, and the players we're seeing there, like Barron, Tom Ahern, James Hume, young players, and then you have guys like David Kilcoyne, obviously, who's nearly got 50 caps, and Marty Moore's only got 10 caps, but is probably towards the end of his career, but is someone I think that could make a late push for the World Cup, and it's good. I thought Farrell had no faith in him, but I think it's nice to see his form for Ulster be rewarded with a place, even though it's not in the senior squad, but with that A group.
Anyone in there that you're particularly happy to see get a call in there, Ian?
Obviously, from a Munster perspective, like seeing Calvin Nash, I actually was coaching him when he first started off in Cookies, and you wouldn't say he's an out-and-out starter for Munster. So to see him getting in there, it's a little bit of a surprise, but I'm delighted for him. But I think that just shows the effect of that what that Emerging Ireland Tour. Everyone was wondering what are the positives of that Emerging Ireland Tour going to be, the effects that it had on obviously a few of the provincial sides, especially probably Munster probably got hit the hardest with it. But I think we can see the fruits of it now. The likes of Jack Crowley, Calvin Nash, those guys, they've been looked at. Shane Daly as well. They've been looked at by the Irish coaches, and they said, okay, these guys have something where they probably haven't shown it with Munster, but they can show it on the Irish scene. So I think it's great to see those type of boys included in the squad.
Yeah, on Nash specifically, Birch, like he's kind of been unlucky. He was one of those, like he's the only one of those 6 uncapped players who haven't been involved in a squad before, so it's probably better to shine the light on him. But he has been unfortunate in the last couple of years. I look back to the start of last season where he started the campaign really well, and I remember that game away to the Scarlets, that one game early on, pretty much this time last year, where Munster just looked absolutely red hot that day, and he in particular was playing quite well. Picked up a really unfortunate injury which kept him out until January, and by that point the season had become so disjointed with games cancelled, it was tough for him to get a run in. And even there last week, he put in a really, really good first half against the Bulls, and picked up that ankle injury right before halftime, which I suppose thankfully doesn't seem like it's too bad. But he's a player who hasn't really got a proper run, and as much of it down to just niggling injuries along the way.
Yeah, he's been really lucky, and I feared. I was very impressed with him, and again in the time he had the other night. And in fairness, every time I see him, I like him. But I was worried that ankle injury would have been enough to keep him out for November. So it's obviously great that the medical reports are telling Andy Farrell that he'll be back. It's just, you get players sometimes who for whatever, a couple of seasons just struggle to get that momentum, and then if they get one break in an international squad or match 23, they show what they can do, and then I suppose the credit that they build in that carries on, and they get picked in squads anyway. But for a younger player like him, it's just getting that opportunity, and I'm not sure. Probably the Fiji match more likely will be the one that he gets a chance to shine in. But he certainly looks like he has the ability to add to the depth that's there. I think we're pretty lucky. I mean, obviously high-profile guys like Earls and Conway out, but we still have Stockdale coming back in, who's proven at that level, and lots of other options as well. James Lowe obviously has that injury as well. So I do think this November, because of injury, really is going to give us a chance, and that A game against the Maoris is going to give us a chance, hopefully, to see what's kind of between 30 and 45 in terms of player depth.
Yeah, and Keats, I suppose the back three and the back row in the forwards, they're probably the most volatile positions when it comes to those injuries, where if we look down at squads over the last few years, the amount of players who have either gotten their break and got to hold on to the jersey because of someone else's misfortune, or on the flip side, guys who have just picked up injuries along the way and haven't been able to get back in because someone else has just kept them out of the team.
Yeah, exactly, and we're probably getting one of those opportunities now with Lowe's injury. There's kind of that's what a lot of people are looking at. Who's going to fill in that position? Because obviously Keenan's back. He's done. I know he's had an injury at the start of the season, but you still probably favour him to start the 15 jersey. Then you've probably got question marks over when you don't have the likes of Conway there. Who's going to fill in that other position? You probably look at Hansen. He did really well, but there's still probably Stockdale coming back. But I thought Jimmy O'Brien's done really well for Leinster, and Ireland are using that left foot option as well. So Jimmy O'Brien could be stepping in for Lowe's left boot there. But and then also you've got Balakoon, who's done really well. There's another opening. So I think that there's a few, like obviously I think the centres probably picked themselves. Obviously 9, 10, they probably picked themselves. But there is a really question mark of who's going to fill in that wing position now that Lowe's out.
Yeah, and Birch, like it's obviously unfortunate that there are those important injuries, like if it, particularly like Lowe and Henderson and Andrew Conway. And I think a lot of us probably would have expected Ireland to be picking a very, very settled team over this window. So is the silver lining of it all potentially that there's going to have to be a little bit more rotation than there probably would have been otherwise, and maybe 12 months down the line something could happen. We could be looking back on this November window and go, geez, thank God player X or Y got that little bit of exposure they did in November.
Yeah, look at we got caught in the World Cup 2 World Cups ago where we had a lot of injuries against France, and the team that played against Argentina just wasn't I suppose ready to compete, and we went out. So I'm sure Farrell is very much aware of that. They have been, he has capped a lot of players. I suppose the thing is to try and get as many players as you can to over 10 caps, and we see like Ryan Baird with 8 caps, etc. But Dan Sheehan's got 10 caps now. You feel pretty comfortable with both of those. If you need him to go play in a World Cup quarter final, are ready to do that. And I suppose November, you look at what England are doing, what France have done with their squads. They have left some big names out, but there's no reason that they wouldn't bring them back in for the Six Nations and then obviously into a World Cup. So I think this is really the last chance to experiment, and we're going in. As I said, we have the opportunity to do it on the back of a very positive summer tour and a good Six Nations. So it's probably a little bit easier for the Irish coaching team to have a little look. I mean, Jeremy Loughman, for example, you'd expect him to play this. He's uncapped. Expect him to play this November. And Joe McCarthy as well. I think there's been a push to fast track him, and I could see him getting some game time, particularly with Henderson out now. it just moves him one place further higher up in the depth chart.
Looking at South Africa specifically, Birch, like I still think probably the vast majority of that first 15 is probably settled enough. To look at two areas, the kind of second back row area, assuming everyone in that squad is fit to play against South Africa in that first match, would you be looking at James Ryan, Tadhg Beirne in the second row and pretty much the same back row as we had in New Zealand? Or given the physicality of South Africa, would you potentially put Tadhg Beirne into the back row and put another second row in beside James Ryan?
Yeah, look, I would be tempted to play Tadhg Beirne at 6, but O'Mahony, to be fair, and Van der Fleer are having big impacts on games, and so I'd be slow to write them off. And I think Ireland have to play, high tempo against the Boks. Like even if we wanted to try and match them power and size wise, I think we'd struggle. So I would be probably a fan of keeping Tadhg Beirne and James Ryan in the second row, with McCarthy possibly playing against Fiji and Australia, and then obviously having Treadwell as an impact player. I think he's grown into that role, an impact player off the bench. He's a very strong ball carrier, and then it's just a case of whether, obviously Conan got an eye injury in Galway. I think Doris and Van der Fleer are nailed on for the back row, and then it's a case of whether you move whether Conan is in the team ahead of Peter O'Mahony for me, and obviously that would mean Doris moving to 8. But I think it's between those 4 really to start against South Africa. I think Peter obviously gives you that defensive line out threat, which I think is massive against the Boks, because you don't want them to be able to engage with you with their maul strength, and the best way to stop them, that's at source. So I would have probably 6-7 months ago would have been thinking Peter mightn't make the team in the World Cup, but I think that he's still incredibly important, and obviously had a huge tour in New Zealand.
Would you go along with that, Keats?
Yeah, I was literally just going to say that South African are a very maul dominant team. They pride themselves on a good set piece, and there's no better man to disrupt the set piece than Pete. He's just incredible. He comes up with really big moments, big steals, and then you leave Tadhg Beirne in the midfield, who also is incredible, coming up with big moments and big steals. So I think that both of them do, and I completely agree with Birch. A few months ago, I probably wouldn't have thought that, but Pete down in New Zealand was exceptional, and it's probably because of the competition of that back row that I think Pete has really stepped up. Whenever he's played for Ireland, he's probably been the main man coming up with those big moments. So I completely agree with Birch there. I think Pete needs to start to take away their line out, take away their maul, because you know what's going to come from South Africa. And
then back 3, Ian. So just for argument's sake, I'm going to assume Hugo Keenan is fit to play, and we would assume start at full back against South Africa. Who would you most likely have on the 2 wings if Andrew Conway's gone, James Lowe is gone? Is it Mac Hansen, and what are the other options there? Rob Balakoon?
Yeah, it's either. I think Hansen probably deserves it. He's done really well since he's come in, and then I think it's between probably Stockdale, Balakoon, and maybe they might move O'Brien to the left wing for that left foot kicking option. But Balakoon's done really well. His defense has improved incredibly well over the last year and a half, and he's got wheels. And Stockdale, he's come back. He's done really well for Ulster, but still trying to find his 2018 form for Ireland. Obviously, he's been suffering with injury, but I think that is probably just the one question mark on this team, for the starting team, who I don't think people will know who they're going to pick there in that left wing. Yeah, and Birch, like Stockdale is the really interesting one, because I actually remember, I'm not sure were you on this particular pod, but right at the very start of the season when Stockdale was coming back, we were talking about him and how it's a big year for him. And the general consensus was he probably just needs to forget about Ireland in the short term and just concentrate and, getting a string of matches together. And look, the way it's all fallen, the injuries have actually gone on the right side from this time, and he's managed to get back into an Ireland squad probably a little bit earlier than he'd expected to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Hansen definitely will start. It's just who takes the other wing spot, and is Hugo going to be back for the first game? If he is, he starts a full back, but if he doesn't, then probably Jimmy O'Brien, and as Ian said, his left foot is really important. But obviously Stockdale, I mean, James Lowe plays left wing, and Ireland use him a huge amount for their exit. So you could have a case where Stockdale's left boot, and the accuracy and length more so than accuracy, makes him an obvious replacement, and Balaclune then ends up fighting with Hansen. So I think a lot of it depends on Keenan. I think if Keenan's available, Stockdale's less likely to start against South Africa.
Even just aside from the Irish squad, Birch, like, how much are you looking forward to seeing Ireland go up against a full-blooded South Africa team? Because the team that came to Dublin 5 years ago were not a good team. No. And even the side that beat Ireland in South Africa in that test series the summer beforehand, they weren't particularly great. It was an Irish squad that was missing a lot of players. Like, you kind of have to go back a long time to have a good Ireland and a good South Africa going up against each other.
Yeah, absolutely, and I can't wait, to be honest. I think it's the perfect opponent for Ireland a year out. I mean, we've developed this way of playing now, which is beautiful to watch. Two sides of attack, a lot of ball movement, a lot of detail around our lines of running, asking questions of the defence. But until we beat a team who are set up like the box, it's still going to be a concern for me. And obviously we could run into them in France. France are quite similar in how they play. It was interesting. I was down in Lyon on Monday and chatting to the coaches there and about where they see the game going. And they basically, Lyon would have been a team who were very open to playing. A guy called Kendrick Lynn, who's a Kiwi, has gone from being a player there to a coach, and would be kept that New Zealand philosophy of play, and he said to me, look, we're probably going down the Galtier route, which is 45 seconds of possession. If you're not going forward, then you give up possession and you go to your kicking game, and that's the box all over. So I think France and the box are two teams that we're going to have to obviously be able to deal with. Hopefully, I think getting that test match at home, to see how we got the game to overcome it. If we don't, it's not the end of the world, as long as we, I suppose, make sure we have it next time we play them. So it's a very different type of opposition than Wales, Scotland, Italy, Australia, and New Zealand, because they're set up completely differently, and I think it's a perfect game for us. And I'm looking forward to seeing the box, and we're going to talk about the Sharks in a minute and their strength, and it's based around the Springboks being back. And I want to see this Irish team play against the world champions with all their box, with a good coaching team, which they have now, which they didn't have last time. We played them, and see how we match up, because the last test we had was the All Blacks. We overcame that, which was brilliant. But this is a completely different, as Eddie O'Sullivan would say, bag of chips.
Certainly easy. And even, like, to go back on what Bert was saying there, like, it's Ireland don't get the opportunity to play against this style of rugby too much. It's really just been those France games in the last few years when they've come up against it, and they have struggled in France are the one side that they haven't been able to get past over the last few years. So it's a big test for themselves 12 months out from when they're going to be playing South Africa as well at the World Cup.
Yeah, I think France and South Africa actually are quite similar. They've kind of gone more towards the defensive route. They've put really strong coaches, or South Africa always put a lot of emphasis on the defensive side. They'll kick, they'll build pressure with their big, gigantic men that they have, which Ireland have struggled against. Like, as Bert said there, against New Zealand, I think we were able to take on New Zealand now. We don't get beat up by New Zealand. We're able to play around them. But South Africa, France, they have big men. They're able to put in place their kicking game, and they'll set up their defensive structures, and they'll come at you, while they're littered with players who can just create magic. So some of those South African players, like Kobe, they can just create magic, but they've got the defensive structure, they've got the great set piece, and they've got all the framework to win again, like they did in the last World Cup. And it will be a tough challenge, but as Bert said, it's going to be interesting to say. It's not the end of the world if we lose, but I think we need to see a framework put in place how we can actually take on these teams, rather than just trying to do the same old way that we beat New Zealand. Like that way is great against certain teams, but you need to play a different way when you play against a team who are big men, who are powerful men, and who have guys who can just create magic out of nowhere.
And how do you go about that then? Like, how do you, if you're used to playing in a certain way, and look, and if you had a game plan that is beating the All Blacks in a Test series, I imagine it's very hard to remove yourself from that and say, well, what we did there in the summer, in that unbelievable Test series win we had, that's probably not going to work this time around.
Listen, if I had those answers, I'd probably be coaching at a higher level then. But I do think to beat them, if they're going to put a kicking game and a defensive game, you really have to beat them at the kicking game. You can't give them opportunities to trap you inside your half and you start running it from deep and trying to take them on. If you get caught there, they'll get their big men over the ball, they'll get penalties, they'll kick to the corner, they'll maul you, and they'll just, it's like a slow death is the way they try and drain your energy, they try and live on big moments. So you just can't get roped into, okay, they're kicking us, let's run everything. You actually, and it might sound boring, but you need to keep beating them at that kicking game. You need to make them make the mistakes, because if they win their penalties inside your half, you know it's either going to be 3, 6, 9, and they'll keep the pressure on and they won't make many mistakes, or they'll kick to the corner, they'll maul you, they'll take the energy out of your legs, and then when the energy's out of your legs, they'll go at you, and then they'll have their guys who can sidestep you in the sixpence, running against your forwards who have been, their legs have been drained, and that's the way to do it. That's learning from Razzie. That's the way he plays the games. He will just make no mistakes, power, and then grind you down, take your energy out, and then they'll give it to the fast man who'll create magic. They don't do anything special. You can't, like, they don't play any different systems to anyone else. It's just pace and power.
It's just nailing the basics, Birch, is it?
Yeah, nailing the basics, but with the tools that a lot of people or a lot of teams don't have, like just the depth they have in the front five. Like sometimes they arguably start their best front row on the bench, but the one that starts would possibly start for most other teams in terms of lock and back row, you know, number 8 even, you know, like the talent they have between Vermeulen, Roos, you know, Coetzee, it's just phenomenal. And yeah, they probably have, I think probably in terms of depth, they've the best depth, and I think they've obviously profited from the fact that they've allowed their foreign player, their superstars to leave to go to Japan for sabbaticals, to go and play in France, you know, like Ches and Kobe and Faf de Klerk went to Sale, etc., but still have them available. But when they were away or when they were gone on contracts abroad, you know, other players you know, found their feet. So they've got phenomenal depth, and obviously playing in the URC now, they're much more the guys who aren't playing in France or the UK. It looks like, for me, you know, Razzie's back from his ban now, and I know he's not officially the head coach, but I mean, Keats would know this very well. I mean, himself and Jack Nienaber are very tight and very, very similar philosophy. Obviously, Felix is doing great work in there as well. So they're probably have the most cohesion of any team going into this World Cup, and I think they're right. They should be favourites, really.
Yeah. We'll park the Irish chat for now, because I am looking at the clock, and we do have to get through a couple of big games in the URC this weekend as well. Moving on to Leinster and Munster this Saturday, 5:15 kickoff at the Aviva Stadium. It's, Keith, I suppose it's a hard enough game to figure out at the moment, simply because of the injury list both teams have at the moment. We really haven't a clue what way people are going to be lining out on Saturday evening. Looking at Munster's injury list on Tuesday, it's funny, after the game on Saturday, I was leaving Thomond Park, and even after Jeremy Lockman scored his try, I remember thinking, God, geez, the small little bits of luck maybe are actually falling Munster's way, you know, with the way that try manifests itself. But then you see the injury list on Tuesday and you go, oh, it's not looking good. You know, you've Tyg Byrne getting a scan, Edwin Adogbo going off. You have Salanoa going through the return to play protocols, and there was an even longer list to go along with it as well. And Leinster at the same time then have had a handful of injuries this week as well, like Will Connors and Ronan Kelleher ruled out for even longer, and a few more players on the sideline. Going on what we've seen of the teams over the last few weeks, is there any part of you that can see a Munster win this Saturday?
I think winning on the weekend obviously gave them a lot of confidence. Bit like what we're talking about there with Ireland and South Africa. I don't think winning is the most important thing for Munster this weekend. And I know that sounds funny to say, but I just think, and they need to back up the performance from the weekend with another good performance. Even with the injury count, I still think obviously Leinster are probably always the favourites at the moment for the last couple of years anyway. But I honestly think that a performance is needed, a back-to-back performance is needed from Munster this weekend rather than a win. I know that sounds a bit defeatist, but I just think they haven't beat Leinster since 2015. Is it up there in the Aviva? I know they won last year.
It was 14 at the Aviva. You should know that. You should know that, Keith.
It was a loaded question.
Your intercept try that day.
Yeah. That was a loaded question. I knew that was the last time we went up there. So. But as I said, I think it sounds quite defeatist, but they just need a good performance. They need to back it up what they did against the Bulls, and I think that will instill a lot of confidence in this group with the injuries. And there is, as I said, there is injuries, and they have to come back, and I think that's just going to strengthen the squad. So if this squad can put in another great performance like they did against the Bulls, I think that would be the best thing for Munster, not necessarily the win.
Birch, in a situation like that, is coming out of Dublin with I know it's jarring to say it in the week of a Leinster-Munster match, but is like Munster coming away from Dublin with a losing bonus point, having played pretty well. Is that something you can take away from the game, or is it like obviously a defeat? It still leaves them in a lot of trouble in the table.
Yeah, but look, I think they need to get a better performance. Like in my mind, the last performance in the Viva Munster-Leinster against the second, third string Leinster team, and it was a bit of a walkover. That
was a pretty sobering evening for them.
Yeah, it was bad. And look, if that happened again, I think it would set them back massively. I think they could win this game. I mean, Ulster came to the RDS last year, and on the back of a defeat, and got a win by playing a very disciplined game plan to take Leinster out of their strides. And the problem for Munster is if they want to evolve their attack, you got to practice it. And I don't necessarily think that's the way to play against Leinster if you want to get a result. I think
they're in a real catch-22 at the moment, aren't they? Like,
they are. But
trying to work through
I think
performances and
but they got to find something that's going to win them games.
Yeah,
week to week, and that's obviously the coaches have identified a transition away, and we saw it last week with Joey. With Joey back at 10, there was a lot better. A lot more eagerness to get the ball in the 15-meter challenge. Sometimes they're passing, let them down, but because the Bulls gave them time, the ball hit the ground, they picked it up, and they often kicked it again in the edge, but that got them territory. So I thought you could see it last week what they want to do. It wasn't perfect, but it was a massive improvement on where it had been the week before. In my mind, I wonder how reliable that form is. I mean, the Bulls. I met Arno Boda, who played for Munster. I met him at the airport. He came over for the weekend. Obviously, he played for Munster and the Bulls, and he had friends in both camps, and he came over for the weekend. And he now plays in Leon, and I just bumped into him and chatting to him, and he was shocked at how poor the Bulls were. And I think it was great to see Munster get the bonus point. It was great to see them, play with a bit more ambition. But you have to wonder, what is that form relevant? And look, if it isn't, they'll get exposed this weekend. But I think from Munster's point of view, it'll settle them down, it'll give them confidence. and there's some good young talent starting to get more game time, and obviously they want to play more. But I just think Leinster's defence, okay, it was bad against the Sharks, but they'll be looking to shut that down. They're looking to shut it down this week, catch Munster behind the gain line. But yeah, it's just probably the pain Munster have got to go through. I think if you get a good performance, it'll actually set them up nicely for Ulster, which is really the must-win game. Ulster at home. If they get anything out of this game, I think it'd be a bonus. And I'm really looking forward to that. Like, I want Munster to be back, being up there with Connacht and Leinster, pushing for trophies. So, and I believe in the coaches. I just think they need a bit of time, and they need some of those youngsters to come through quickly.
It's funny, you're talking there, Bert, about Munster's attacking game, and it needs time. They actually kind of went back to, they moved the ball to the edges on the weekend, but what got them, two of their tries was kicking on the edge. So there is everyone talks about playing attack, keeping the ball in hand, but if it's not the right thing to do to keep the ball in hand, you have to kick it. And as I said there, they got two of their tries just from playing the ball off the edge. They came back down the edge and they kicked in behind, put pressure, caught the Bulls over their own try line. It was a 5 meter scrum, which one try came from. And then the other try was Joey making a little break down the edge, but then kicking in behind. And that's how they forced an error and Jeremy Loughnan scored. So we really need to, I think they have been focused on the last few weeks of keeping the ball in hand, getting their attack going. But it just looked like on the weekend, it was like, okay, well, if it's not on to run, let's put the pressure on in other ways. And that was through the kicking game. And I felt they did that on the weekend. So if they can get that balance of kicking, but also keeping the ball in hand and attacking to the space, then I think we can see Munster's attacking game evolve a bit more. But you have to kick to get space. You have to kick to get kicks back to get your counter attack going. It can't always just be in the hand. And I think when Munster start developing that, which I felt they did a little bit on the weekend, I think that's when you will see their more space opening through front balls and through handling rather than kicking.
Yeah, and what we saw, the obviously you spoke about those two tries, but we saw Munster being very good 5 yards out again. And so again, play to your strengths. If you can score tries through ground and pound, absolutely. Leinster kicked the ball a lot as well. They're all about kicking on the edge and getting that field position. So I don't think Munster, I think that has to be part of their transformation is to be able to find space, as you say, Keats, and it was good to see it. And it was even some of the forwards kicking on the edge last week, but it was a good press as well and a good kick chase and good discipline not to let the Bulls escape those positions easily. So, I think they'll go into it with a much more positive frame of mind. Hopefully you get a good crowd and, a really good game. Two of our derbies have been ruined by weather. Connacht Leinster and Leinster Ulster. It was very, very difficult to play. So if we can get a bit better weather, and we see both teams go at each other.
On Leinster and that last game against Connacht, is there? I'm trying to figure out what would be the main thoughts in the Leinster camp this week. Is there a frustration at the way that last week's game against Connacht panned out, or would there be a bit of reassurance that they've shown over the last few weeks they can win matches in a variety of ways, like a complete shootout against the Sharks, followed by an arm wrestle against Connacht. You're talking 13 tries and 88 points in the Sharks game, and 10-0 against Connacht. Is there a reassurance there that they can adapt to the various conditions and they can play whatever way the game requires?
Yeah, that's what I would be taking from it. If I was the coach, I'd be reiterating that message. Okay, look, lads, we can do it this way, but also we can get down and dirty and do it this way. I was at the Connacht Leinster match. I know you could see early on that when the weather started to come down, the rain started to come down, it was a bit of a sideways rain with the wind, that they were trying to play, and the defense was getting on top, and then you could clearly see that, okay, we need to start kicking the ball away. It was actually a disadvantage to have the ball that night. So I think it's really good for Leinster to know that, as I said, they can score a lot of tries against the Sharks, but also they can change them. What the most probably pleasing thing about that Connacht match is they kept them to 0. You don't see that anymore nowadays. A team staying to 0, and Connacht definitely had chances. They had 10 lineouts, I think, in the Leinster 22, which they coughed up, whether through bad throwing or bad lifting or what the other reasons why hookers don't win lineouts. It's never the hooker's fault, but so I think I'd be taking a lot of positives. If I was the Leinster coach, I'd be saying, listen, we can do it different ways now.
And then just moving on to Connacht, Birch, like I saw someone corrected a tweet that we had put out talking about a must-win game for some team earlier in the week, saying, well, isn't every game a must-win? And yeah, technically that's true. But if we're talking about Connacht and the Scarlets this weekend, like, we've given them plenty of excuses over the last few weeks with the really, really difficult start they've had. But these are the games now against Scarlets at home on a Friday night that they really, really have to back up and put in a result.
Yeah, absolutely. This is absolutely crucial for them. We've been forgiving of them because of the tough fixtures. They got the home game against Munster. They got the result there. Obviously lost to Leinster, but this is massive. I think Scarlets have been very inconsistent, quite poor, and you know, I think I like the way Connacht have seemed to have improved the areas that were weak last year. Their scrum now is winning penalties. Last year was giving up penalties, and their line of defence was excellent, really, really good, and I took apart Munster and Leinster at source there, which is positive. Their line of maul isn't perfect, but we saw against Munster for the Beelum try when they get it right. You know, they have the I don't think they have the size and power, but they have the connections and work rate to do damage, and particularly against, you know, the Scarlets. I mean, they can take the Scarlets on up front. I think it's a must win, and I think it should be a 5-pointer, to be honest. As long as they get a little bit of luck with the weather, I think Scarlets are defensively porous. They haven't shored up that area that was a weakness for them last year, and I think Connacht need to hit their attacking straps as well. I think they've tightened up defensively, tightened up set piece, but that's only going to be useful if they get back to their attacking flair. You know, that made them quite difficult to stop, and that hasn't happened yet. Various reasons why, but yeah, I think this is a win, a game that Connacht should be looking to get 5 points out of.
Keats, you're nodding along there as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. A bit of a contradiction to the Munster. The Munster need a performance, but actually Connacht need a win.
Yeah, they need the result more than the performance, really,
yeah,
isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. Like they just need to win. I do think they are capable of getting a 5-point against Scarlets with the Scarlets form, especially Scarlets away form at the moment. So it's definitely a must win for Connacht at least. And then if they want to start pushing up the scoreboard, they need the bonus point, because you can't win anything this time of the year, but you can certainly put yourself out of contention for a lot of things if you don't get the results before Christmas. And they still have another few tough tests before Christmas. I think they have another four interpros before the new year. So all these matches, yeah, they need to win.
Yeah, that game is at 7:35 on Friday evening. The other game we didn't talk about so far, and we'll touch on it now, Sharks against Ulster on Friday evening. It's frustrating, Birch, that's kicking off at the same time as Leinster and Munster at the Aviva, because I know Ulster haven't named their team. They won't be until tomorrow, but the Sharks put theirs out earlier this morning, and just looking at it now, I mean, Oxenshade, Bongi Banambi, Thomas Dutoit's there, Eben Etzebeth, Khaleesi, Jaden Hendrickse, Maxoli Mapimpi, Apaleta Fassi, and then even just younger, exciting guys like Vincent Chichuka and Pepsi Buthelezi. It's an absolutely stacked team, and I've no doubt that Ulster are going to be putting out a pretty strong side as well themselves. Like, it has all the makings for an absolute belter of a game.
Yeah, I think these are the two best games. Unfortunately, they clash. Ulster Sharks, Leinster, Munster. This is what we've been waiting for with the Sharks. Obviously, they brought on some of those big names off the bench last week and demolished Glasgow. Really impressive. And, you know, the investment that's gone into this team in terms of talent, you know, it was strong last year, and obviously they were disappointed to slip up to the Bulls in the quarterfinal. But you know, their ownership team, their fans expect them to be the best team in South Africa, and on paper, they certainly look to have all the tools. So it's a huge challenge for Ulster. I'm excited to see if Ulster can stand up to it. I mean, Ulster being pretty good this year. Obviously, the only blot in their copybook was that Leinster game, which, in fairness, they chased hard at the end and came back into it. But obviously, given Leinster too much of a head start, shipped a lot of points against the Lions and shipped a lot of points away to Scarlets. So I do think, while their attacking game is looking even better than it was, defensively, they may still be missing Jared Payne, who's had a big impact in Claremont, actually. Reports of France are very strong about him and the influence he's had there. So, yeah, I'm fascinated to see if Ulster can stay with the Sharks, particularly up front, because that's Sharks scrum is very powerful.
Is there any element of a little bit of pressure off ever so slightly on Ulster since they have picked up a win last week, Ian?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that win last week, I think it's their first win on South African soil, was it? Or
certainly in the URC.
The URC, yeah. I think that's a massive confidence boost. But as I said, that was against the Lions, who have played pretty well this season. They've been a bit of a shock to everyone this year that they've started well. But I think this will be the Ulster's real test to see how far. Okay, yeah. They did well against Ulster or Leinster, but Leinster were too strong for them. I think, as Bert said, their attacking game has come on quite a lot, and I actually enjoy watching them play. They have shit points now, but I think this will be their first real test to play the Sharks away from home. Let's really see where this Ulster team is out. I think, because if I think they can beat the Sharks over there, I think they're pretty good contenders in Europe and obviously for the URC, because, as I said, their attacking side is pretty good. Let's see what they can do against the Sharks, because if they go well, I think that will give that whole group a lot of confidence.
Yeah, they've had a few false dawns in the last few years, Birch, but just finally on it, if they were to pick up a win away against the Sharks this weekend, is that a proper statement?
Yeah, I think it would be. I think it would be massive. And McFarland's going to look for those during the year. There's the run-the-mill games where they're expected to win and they more than likely win. I think they'll have a very high win percentage. But there's certain games he'll say, look, this is going to be a litmus test in terms of how we moved on. Are we going to be ready to win a knockout rugby? And I think, given the team the Sharks have picked, this is one of them.
Yeah, certainly is. And that's where we'll leave it, guys. Thanks a million for joining us. As I say, Leinster against Munster is the live game on RT2 and RT Player this Saturday, 5:15 kickoff, build up underway from 4:30. And there's also live commentary on RT Radio 1 of that game as well at the Aviva Stadium. Birch and Ian Keatley, thanks a million for joining us. And we'll speak to you again next week on the RTÉ Rugby podcast.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.